Γνωριστήκαμε το ίδιο μετά. Νωρίς.
Μπορεί. Θέλω ηλεκτρισμό καταρχήν. Το Wi-Fi κάπου το είδα το...
Ναι, είναι το HUA Free Wi-Fi.
Ναι. Και συνήθως το συνδέω με αυτό.
Ναι. Είναι και πρώτο εδώ.
Είναι καλύτερο να το βάλεις αυτό πρώτα στο...
Εγώ όταν είναι έτσι ο καιρός, μονίμως τρέχει λίγο. Είναι από το...
Ναι,
Μπαίνει στο port. Για να δουλέψει πρέπει να είναι... Εντάξει.
μια χαρά. Οκ. Οπότε να κάνω μερικές... θα χρειαστείτε να έχετε κάποια συγκεκριμένη σελίδα πάνω όταν ξεκινήσει, πριν να βάλω το PowerPoint. Ή αυτή η σελίδα είναι OK. Μπορώ να ξεκινήσουμε κατευθείαν με τη δική μου.
Μπορείς να ξεκινήσεις κατευθείαν με τη δική σου.
OK. Οπότε να οργανώσω λίγο το interface.
Μπορείς να καθίσεις κιόλας.
Αχα.
Και δεν ξέρω αν θες presenter, μπορείς μόνο να το συνδέσουμε επίσης. Αν σε βολεύει περισσότερο.
Θα το βολέψω. Νομίζω ότι έχω και ένα εκεί. Ναι. Ευχαριστώ.
Θα σου ρωτήσω το μεταξύ. Και μεταξύ κλείσω τις εκθέσεις, να χτίσει εδώ στο Χαροκόπη και παλιός μου χτίσει.
Χάρηκα πολύ. Κώστας.
Που σας έλεγα που είναι ο expert σε social networks στην Ελλάδα, νομίζω ότι αυτός είναι. Είναι πάρα πολύ καλός. Οπότε θα βρεθείτε μετά.
Θα τα πούμε μετά.
Στο διάλειμμα.
Στο επόμενο session, από ό,τι είδα, είναι για social media.
Ναι, οπότε εντάξει.
Ναι, το έβγαλα για να...
Έχω βγάλει για το presenter.
Ναι, το ξέρω. Αλλά έχω και άλλη, όχι δεν νομίζω. Αλλά έχω άλλη μια επιλογή και θα την χρησιμοποιήσω σε μισό λεπτό. Έχω...
Τώρα θα βγω, λέω και θα γίνει. Αλλά μετά πήγα στο ρεύμα που... Ήταν σφαίρα.
Αλλά έχει παραδείξει και το καλοκαίρι μετά όσο έχεις ξεκινήσει. Τώρα.
Έχω αυτό το οποίο επίσης μπορεί να δουλέψει, ναι.
Γιατί κάνεις ερώτηση. Αγοράσαμε
εξοικειώθηκε ο κόσμος με την τιμή της μηνύμης. Τώρα δεν είναι τιμή, δεν μπορεί να το σπίρουμε κάτι.
όχι, αυξηθήκαμε να κάνω, οπότε συμφέρει να
Και να σκέφτεσαι.
Το HUA Free Wi-Fi είναι το... και δεν χρειάζεται password και τέτοια.
σας δείχνει σε μεταναχώρηση. Ωραία, δεν πειράζει. We have reserved the date. Συγκεκριμένα να πουλήσει και δουλεύω σκληρά στο θέμα τώρα αυτό.
Γιατί δεν με ακούσετε, δεν το έκανα παρέα.
Τι είναι αυτό? Γι' αυτό το πλάνετο εικόνη
Τώρα που στείλαμε στο FP, ήταν κομμένο γραμμένο στο κομμένο γραμμένο, δηλαδή το έλεγαμε να γίνει μέσα στο μάτι. Τώρα για το Open, ξέρετε τι έκανε. Επειδή έπρεπε να είναι πολύ focus σε μια τεχνολογία, δηλαδή πρέπει να λέει θα κάνουμε αυτή την τεχνολογία και θα βάλουν οι κοινωνιολόγοι, θα βάλουν οι γιατροί και οι ICT για να το λύσουν. Αλλά δεν είναι ένα μόνο, και πρέπει να είναι πολύ ναρό. Γιατί αυτό περιμένουν να αρχίσει να κάνει τα breakthrough σε μια τεχνολογία σε τέτοιο βαθμό που να αποφάμε μετά. Είναι εντάξει όλη η αγορά, είναι μια αυτή που πιστεύω. Αλλά δεν μπορούμε να μην τα σποτάσουμε στην κράτος. Οπότε θα τα σκότωμε. Και έτσι να μέσα από τα κομμάτια του, στην ουσία, γυρνάνε με λίγο το μοντέλο. Είναι μια ωραία άνθρωπος στην ίδια το ρίσκο. Το πόσο ρίσκο διατρέχει. Αντί να το παίρνει η αυτό που λέτε, πάει αυτά έχουν δύο.
Καλώς το λέτε, τι είσαι. Εσένα, τι άλλαξε, ό,τι θέλεις. Research. Δεν υπάρχει ιεραρχία, ό,τι θες. Ό,τι δηλώνεις εσύ. Research. Δεν θα σύνδεσαι. Υπάρχει research. Research. Research, senior, that's professional. Αλλά δεν γίνεται σε επαγγελματικό χρόνο. Πέρα δεν είναι γι' αυτό. Πάμε μέσα και θα έχουμε περισσότερα κομματάκια. Μας είναι δεν έχει προσωπικά. Προφανώς την ίδια. Όχι μας πάντα. Προκειμένου να καταφέρουμε το περίπτωση που κάνει πολύ γρήγορα. Και να κάνει feedback από το web development. Πιο ωραίο, πολύ πιο ωραίο. Το κατάλαβα τώρα. Όσο το μήνυμα είναι άλλο από το PCI και το λέμε και μήκα τώρα, όσο το μήνυμα είναι τις κατομμύρια, δεν είναι σημαντικά. Αποδεικμένα τα project, γιατί είναι τώρα που χρησιμοποιούν τότε. Έτσι θα βρισκόμαστε σε κατάλληλες, οι οποίες είναι ίδιες. Η κατοχή κατανομία είναι όπως έπρεπε να είναι. Και όσο το μήνυμα στο άτομο, είναι σαν το κόστος. Είναι το τυπό, δηλαδή εκεί που κάνεις διαβήσεις και κατανομές είναι 4 μήνυμα. Έτσι λέγεται. Άλλες όσο αυτό το μήνυμα στο άτομο, το πρώτο είναι κάτι σου είναι άστο, γιατί το εμπαραδόν είναι ψήφος από το ξέρει κάποια στιγμή. Και μικραίνει κάτι μήνυμα στο ίντερνετ. Και λέει το είναι προηγούμενο το μαθηματικά, ότι τα μοντέλα δεν μπορούν να το γίνεται μεγάλο. Οπότε λέει, είναι λέξη προσήκηση. Ο ένας τρόπος είναι να πας να πεις στην ώρα και σας συνδέσεις, και θα βάζω το μαθαίμα να το μάθει και ό,τι καταλάβει και θα γίνει και σε frame. Το άλλο είναι να μάθει πιο ωραία το μάθει, αλλά να μάθει δεν καταλάβει. Οπότε το έχουμε στο πρώτο κομμάτι. Ωραία.
Καλημέρα σας. Έχουμε κάποιον που δεν καταλαβαίνει ελληνικά. Αλλά είμαστε Έλληνες μεταξύ μας. No, so we have one that... hello there, good morning. Very glad to welcome you to this morning session and introduce to you Professor Panagiotis Metaxas, who is a professor at the Wesley College, Director of the Media Arts and Sciences program. He's also collaborating with the Center for Research on Computational Society at Harvard University. His research interests include social analytics, but also parallel computing and image processing, understand. So his talk today is going to be on computational social sciences, how to approach the idea of collecting data carefully so that you don't lead yourself into mistakes. Professor Metaxas.
Good morning, and thank you very much for coming. I would like first to acknowledge the array of collaborators that I had over the years. Can you hear me okay in that distance from the microphone? And they're coming from many different countries and from many different schools. Eni Mustafarai is from Wellesley as well. Daniel is from Spain, University of Oviedo. Harold Schoen from Bamberg in Germany. Markus Strohmeyer is from the University of Cologne now. Peter Glur from MIT. And the rest are all of my students who have worked together in the projects over the years. You may notice that they are almost all women. It has to do with the fact that Wellesley is an all-women's college, and that explains the people that I've worked with. So that's an outline of what I will be talking about. And I will be talking a little bit in the beginning about what is computational social science and what kind of problems it tries to solve, why the problems that it tries to solve can be considered harder than otherwise, and introduce one of the more interesting parts of computational social science, which is our desire to predict events that are happening in the future. There is a human obsession with that. So I'll tell you some of the successful and not so successful predictions that we had, and I'll then focus on why is it so difficult to do predictions. So if you want to follow the talk in my slides, if you go to bit.ly PCI 14-Athens, the capital letters are important, you will follow you can see all the slides. So this is the definition of what is computational social science, the study of group interactions and social phenomena. And we try to have this introduction through a collection of data that are coming mostly, but not exclusively, through the social web. This is the web that we are exchanging information, and we are producing enormous amount of data. Some of the questions we try to ask are questions that usually one might be surprised to find in computer science. Come with questions like how do work groups perform better, under what conditions, under what communication patterns can be performing better. Are there any particular characteristics of social events that we can predict better than others? And some of the things that these days I hear a lot about, because I have done some publications, is whether the web is full of lies, and is there any way to actually detect how information and misinformation is propagating. So I will focus in today's lecture mostly on the prediction of social events. I understand that I have about an hour. Is that correct? And I will try to stop at 45 minutes so I can leave some time for questions. So I would be very happy to answer any questions that I can. So let's, what is the new things that social web brings to us? One of the usual jokes I say when I talk to a group of non-experts is that computer science is neither. It's not about computers and it's not a science. It's really that discipline that provides the tools that no matter what you do, we can help you do better. That's why you have, you marry computers with, let's say, medicine, and you have bioinformatics. You marry it with, let's say, chemistry, and you have computational chemistry. You name it, we can come in and make things better. And the latest effect that we have is when computing gets into social science, and suddenly with a collection of data that we have, we can start answering some questions better than we could do before. The tools are coming from, let's say, search engines, which collect an enormous sum of data, trillions of data on a regular basis. We double the collection of data we are recording within, every week. And I'm probably exaggerating here, so then don't try to double it in a week, but it's pretty high. And from blogs, from Facebook, from Twitter, we have a lot of data. These are things that no human can really read, but we have machines that they can analyze them. And so fields such as machine learning is trying to apply some kind of statistical method, so automatically detect patterns that would allow us to figure out what's happening with our data. And there is a little bit of obsession with big data. These days, if you want to get any serious grant in the United States, you better stick the word big data there, because otherwise people will not pay attention to you. But big data can also have some troubles. It's not only the troubles of managing the volume, but also trying to make sense of what you read. I became particularly interested with the field of prediction, which is something that humans are always obsessed with. We are, since the ancient times, we're going into astrology, and we're going into magicians and oracles, trying to find out what will happen in the future. We are this species that we have a fear of the future, and we have an obsession trying to predict it as much as possible. So in the last 3-4 years, there was a large collection of papers that started addressing this issue. It was the paper Predictive Power Over Line Chat that was trying to see what things can be predicted through the blogs. Another one, predicting movie sales via blog. Predicting the president with Google Trends, where you could theoretically figure out whether your product would sell well or not, just looking at what people talk about on Google, what they search for on Google. One of the more interesting applications, maybe because it has implications in health, is detecting epidemics, detecting flu epidemics maybe a week before the CDC, the Center of Disease Control, has even realized that there is an epidemic, some very exciting. And then the titles became a little more provocative. Predicting the future with social media was mainly trying to predict the success of opening nights in movies. The stock market, that immediately turned a lot of heads. Maybe you can predict the stock market and become rich very quickly just by looking at what people say. Consumer behavior and flu detector. Nowadays, you could check online to see if there is any flu in any part of the world and maybe vaccinate in... What particularly, however, attracted my attention was this paper, Predicting Elections with Twitter, what 140 characters reveal about political sentiment. There were some bold statements in this paper, so I got very interested. You probably sympathize with me being a Greek, having a political situation in which elections are always around the corner. You would like to know before they come what's happening. So I figured, let me try to take a look. But the papers became even more detailed. Back in 2013, if I remember correctly the year, in just a couple of conferences, there were 37 papers with the word predict in their titles, and several that they had even in there. So I put together in this small collection of papers, this is, as I say, a small minority of all the papers were there. I put the papers that were trying to do prediction in different categories: flu trends, box office, that's movie sales, sales forecast, stock market, electoral results. And you could see that the matrix is almost complete just with a small sample there, which is everybody wanted to predict anything possible, very understandable. The question mark in the upper corner is my first paper in this area, which was a little bit of a spoiler. I figured out I could not predict elections, and I got particularly interested. Why couldn't I? I must be very incompetent for somehow, because it seems like everybody else was predicting. The paper underneath, as of yesterday, had 623 citations. That's a highly successful paper, and I'll take an issue with that in a second. So let's see, let's first set the definitions right. Predict, if you look at the dictionary, has a very concrete definition. It means to predict before something happens what will happen. In advance, foretell the future. So if that is our definition of what prediction means, I put together in a slide all the events in which people have been able to predict elections with social media. There isn't really any, despite the fact that there are so many papers. So what happened? Well, my first attempt, as I said, was to look into Google Trends, because for my experience, I had seen that when you have elections, there is a lot of people searching for the candidates in advance. And this is the interface of Google Trends, which kind of show you at that time that Obama had many more queries on Google than McCain. To some people, that meant that Obama would win. Obama won, therefore it must be true. Well, let's see. I started looking for the United States elections, congressional elections for 2008 and 2010. And they were interesting elections because the tables turned from one election to the other. In one case, the Democrats had what they call a landslide win. They took the majority of the seats. In the other, it's the Republicans who won. Visually, it looked like that, almost a mirror image of each other. So these were pretty good data because you could see whether in two consecutive elections the techniques that were true applying in one could apply to the other. So I started looking, but in order to put the bars at the right place, you have to figure out how do you know if you predicted something correctly. One of the things that I wanted to compare was what the experts were doing, like the New York Times, and how the incumbents were doing. Now, incumbent means somebody who's already in office, who's already elected, a past parliamentarian, let's say, who's coming up for election. Usually, people who have already been in office are much more likely to be elected again. They're known. Everybody knows, this minister or this parliamentarian. So they have an edge. Looking at how well predictions happen between these competitors, Google Trends, which is the last bar, was doing rather poorly, as you can see. Was predicting maybe 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 3 elections, when the New York Times and incumbency, that is, if you were just betting with the previous guy, you were doing much better. It was a little better in highly contested races, which was important, but that is really not fair to Google Trends because not everybody had a presence in the web at that time. So if you're looking at the cases in which one of the candidates had a very serious presence on the web, had a web page, had a social media outlet, had staff that was sending information, Google Trends did actually much better in that case. For the highly contested races, actually beat everybody, was able to predict 80% of the elections, more than anybody else. But that was also a little too fair to Google because you're looking for somebody who's not on the web, you're not going to find this person. So if you're looking at those cases in which both of the candidates had presence on the web, Google Trends were not doing well. We're actually doing under 40%, when the traditional ways of figuring out the candidates was doing much better. So what was going on here? And that was, my first kind of slap on the face. Wait a minute, I can't predict why, or Google cannot predict. It seems that Google Trends was a bad predictor, and in fact, you could say that it was a good predictor of defeat. If a lot of people are searching for your name on the web, maybe they have a reason, and that's not a good reason for you. Maybe they have heard something about you that's not nice for you. And, that was quite interesting. So, but that was Google Trends. How about the other social media? How about, let's say, what Twitter was doing? That is one of the very popular means of collecting data. The German paper that I told you about, which has been cited so highly, was actually coming up with a very serious statement. It says, the mere number of tweets mentioning a political party, that's in Germany, can be considered a plausible reflection of vote share. That is, if people talk about you on Twitter, you're going to win. How about that? This is a way of understanding the paper. You just count tweets coming left and right, and you can figure out the winner. That's kind of pretty cool. So I figured, let me try to see how is that happening. Now, one of the things we do not do much in computer science is kind of verifying results that have been published in the past. In medicine, this is the norm. There are very few cases in medicine that somebody will say this drug is good and nobody will contest that. There will be series of tests and retests to make sure that actually we got it right. We don't usually retest anything of much of the things we're doing. And there is a reason for that. It's not that we're lazy, but when you have developed a system and you have debugged it very carefully, and you have made every effort to make sure that your program is working correctly every time, you don't expect major surprises down the road. Here, however, we are dealing with society, we're not dealing with nature, and that makes a difference. So, since I had the data for the US elections, I said, let's see if we can do that in the US elections. So, here are some of the samples, 6 congressional elections that were quite interesting in the United States. They were just randomly taken from the collection I had. And 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats won in those. And you can see the results of who won. If you were looking at what the German paper was saying, you would find that it was successfully predicting 50% of the elections. 50% between 2 outcomes is not very impressive, I would say. That's what you would do at random. But maybe they had something going for them in the sentiment analysis. Maybe they could detect the sentiment and they could tell whether, some comment was positive or negative. So I looked in the sentiment analysis and I found that 50% of those were correctly predicted. Not the same 50% with the others, but not a complete overlap. So it wasn't like that. The other interesting thing was that the sentiment was also not measured correctly. When you go down and you start looking whether the algorithms for sentiment analysis would actually give you the right answers, you would find that no, it wouldn't. Pretty much it was a coin toss for that. So I figured I have to tell somebody about that, but I looked again to what the German paper was saying, and here is the paper I was telling you with a very high level of citations. And an interesting question to ponder about is, why a paper that by now is known that it is so wrong has so many citations? Is it possible that people cite without reading what others have? Yeah, let's think about that for a second. So it turns out that actually this paper was contested by another paper in Germany where they did the same kind of calculation and they found out that actually it would have been the Pirate Party that would have won in Germany, not the CDC. And in fact, here is the result. The Pirate Party, which is a party that mostly created its campaign through the social media, would have taken 1/3 of the vote. But apparently the authors decided to ignore that somehow. And the question is, why do you ignore? So we came up with a very forceful paper. It says, no, you can't really predict using Twitter. And I hope you can get the little joke here with the picture. This is the Obama colors before the, his win in the American elections. But instead of Twitter, I have put the Angry Birds in there. So you cannot. So that's one thing. Now try to publish negative results. Try to send to a conference and say, I tried what the others tried and it didn't pan out. The results were not there. Things did not go very well. So I got this nice letter that starts, "We're sorry to inform you." You may have seen at some point, something like that. The paper actually was accepted as a poster, but not as a full paper. Unless negative results is methodologically impeccable, they wanted me to prove that, some kind of proof of absolute impeccability of results. We cannot really be sure about that. And they argued that you could have done better if you have tried to something else. I would have predicted better if, knowing the answer, I could have adjusted my algorithms to predict the answer I knew. Is that right? So all I was trying to do is to see if some other paper was correct. And I was punished at that time for that. So I figured it is worth some discussion after that. So I didn't leave it. I'll tell you the rest of the story. Interestingly enough, at the very same conference that my paper was accepted as poster, there was another paper that was predicting elections with yet another method. Just looking at what the politicians say would predict elections. That would be really ridiculous, but that got in. So what the heck is going on here? The reason I had become so suspicious was that I had reasons to believe that you can't really predict elections. And that goes back into some research I had done a few years ago. We had to do with this very interesting title, I guess, Web Spam, Social Propaganda, and the Evolution of Search Engines. I had observed that actually when you're looking for information on the web, you're going to find these pieces of information that somehow have a match of things that people have written, because it is really a text matching that we're doing. That's what the search engines are doing. And I had been able to kind of categorize the search engines in 3 different generations, 4 being the one that we currently live, as a way of the search engines countering the spam. That is, the effort from spammers, from individuals, to fool the search engines. And let me give you a little briefing about how this works, because I think it's quite interesting. So, in the first generation, we have search engines that they're just behaving according to theory. They're just taking the theory of information retrievals, they apply it, and they get the results. That's how the first search engines work. But very soon after that, it turned out that was not good enough. So Lycos came with an extra measure, that of site popularity. And yet, some years later, Google and other search engines came up with the idea of PageRank. So it seems like there was a continuous updating of the way that the search engines were working, and only the first one was according to theory. The other was kind of more experimental. So how did things work? The first is based on, the theory of information retrieval as it was shaped in the early 70s, which is you count words, you're looking at frequency, and you're looking in particular at the frequency of rare words. Common words do not carry much signal. It is rare words that will tell you whether a document is really relevant to what you try to do. If you find the word, let's say, the in a page, you can imagine that it's everywhere. It's not going to have any information. If you find the word boycott, then you know that this paper probably has something to do with boycott. So some rare words have greater significance. Now, if you are a spammer, and by spammer I mean somebody who would like your page to come higher up in Google search or in other search rather than your competitors, what do? You try to create information that will be preferred than other pages. So you create what people coined as keyword stuffing. You take words that are likely to be searched and you pile up a lot of words inside the document, and you hope that you will fool the search engines. And they were able, in fact, to fool the first generation of search engine machines, search engines, and eventually search engines became very upset. At some point, BMW, who was using this kind of technique very heavily, was punished by search engines that they would not get the results in the search results for 6 months. You know, search engines suddenly had the ability of telling you what you would be able to see, what you would be allowed, and what not, which is a very serious issue if you think about it. We use the web as our way of being informed. So having a search engine able to determine what you should see and what not can have serious implications. But they thought that this is a way of punishing those who were not playing by the rules. So search engines came up with a better idea very soon. They said, it's not enough to have the right words. You have to be popular. You have to be, you know, somebody that others know about you. So they created this kind of extra characteristic which says, it's not only what you contain, but you have to be popular. Others should say things about you. Well, you're still a spammer, let's say, and you try to figure out how to fool that idea. If they want popularity, let's give them popularity. You create what people call link farms. You're just creating lots of websites, and you copy your information in many of these sites, and then you have these sites point to each other. That creates a very powerful collection of neighborhood on the web, and it appears as if something important is happening there. Here is a search I had done about a drug that is outlawed, human growth hormone, and you could see that it appears as if something important is happening there. So that idea was shot by pretty much the idea of PageRank, which brought the new parameter that says it's not enough to be popular. You have to be somebody. You have to be famous. And how are you famous? Well, if other famous sites say that you're famous. So your reputation is based on testimonials by others that you're reputable, which is really what happens in many parts of human endeavors. How do we know in academia who's somebody? Well, somebody who's been cited by other somebodies. And if you're nobody, probably you're very low in this scale. So that's where the PageRank was based. That was a very powerful idea, and initially has, by the way, some beautiful math underneath, calculating for huge data sets the PageRank of a page. And seems like this was the killer. That's something that spammers could not do. I almost believed that myself when I did some searches, and then I figured out that, wait a minute, there are ways that you can actually do that. You can fool the search engines. And then with a little more search, I figure out that people were already doing that. They had created what I named mutual admiration societies. In other words, different sites were becoming important in different fields. One was, let's say, selling shoes, and the other was, let's say, programmers in expertise in a programming language, and a third was a political party. If they started exchanging links, they would all appear in the eyes of the search engines are very important. It's like being at a party and you know where the action is when there are people around a small group of people and they all look with admiration in this group. Something important must be happening right there. Well, they were gaming search engines big time, and in fact it was a whole industry. What I show you here was an announcement that says, if you want to come to our cycle, make sure that you have PageRank at least 6, because we all have PageRank 6, and we are all linking now to get PageRank 7, which was, some universities do not have that kind of PageRank. So anybody could, with good organization, get this kind of PageRank. So a whole industry was created with creating links and, linking to each other and whole categories. Then they moved into blogs in which you would start writing comments about other people's blogs, and you would put your links in there. One of the more funny ones is this, in which somebody's wedding was spammed badly by spammers. The spammers had so much fun that they even created a little competition to fool the search engine. So they created completely synthetic context, negritude, ultramarine, which are words that are made up. They have no meaning. And they try to see how many of them and how quickly they could make search engines believe that this is an important term that everybody should know about. And, you know, it was kind of making fun of search engines big time. The search engines got very upset, but they had more troubles at that time to deal with, because the third generation search engines, not only did they have the idea of reputation building, they also had the idea of anchor text. Anchor text is what you write and you surround by the hyperlink, so that when somebody clicks on the text, will take you to the page. So, as an example, for my school, you could find in one page the reference to Wellesley College, and that would take you to the page. You would find the reference in the best liberal arts colleges, and then you would find a link there. And the term tops women's colleges will also link there. So just by the links, but the text of the links, you can figure out that Wellesley College is a liberal arts college, and it is a women's college, and it is among the top ones. So you get information that's not contained necessarily in the final page, but it's contained in what others tell about you. Great idea, but you can spam that too. In particular, this became very popular to spam around elections. So where the President Bush, the previous president of the United States, got really upset was that whenever you were searching for the text "miserable failure," he would come up first. He got very upset, of course, but then those who dislike that, they managed to get Jimmy Carter as number 2, and Michael Moore and Hillary Clinton, to show that, yeah, you can create, you know, this kind of spam, we can create too. This coined the term Google bomb. Google bomb is creating text that's supposedly irrelevant to the final link, and you can persuade the search engines that you know the truth. One of my funnier stories about this kind of spamming, this kind of bombing, was with the Google automatic translation a few years ago, actually in 2010, that when you were trying to translate from Greek the word leftai parkoun, there is money, the famous term of Pandreu, you would find as translation, there is no money. People were, you know, kind of bombing so to give this translation for fun, I guess. And that did not go far away, it did not go away quickly, because as soon as Obama was inaugurated as president, you found him as being the prominent miserable failure. And it is not that search engines could not try to actually fix the problem. In all of these years, they have been trying to fix the problem. In fact, they are trying everything they can. In this article, they list that it's not just PageRank that they're doing. They are doing calculation of about 200 signals to figure out what's the appropriate page. Now, that's a little bit of admission of defeat. If somebody tells you that you claim to have a great idea of finding similarity and relevance, and you say, yeah, but I'm using 199 others as well, the one that you're claiming to be so strong is probably not as strong. And this is something that's going on continuously. Another example is that the problem with PageRank, actually, to introduce that, is the following. A link is a positive reference no matter what you say about the link. So you could be blasting somebody as being a terrible person, as being unprofessional, but as long as you are using a link to them, you're actually giving them positive feedback. That's why I have translated the αφήμη και τη δυσφήμιση είναι διαφήμιση, because really means that for PageRank, any reference is a good reference. And in this case, somebody was selling fake glasses, sunglasses, and he was a terrible person. He would essentially take your money and send you junk, and people would get very upset, and they would write pages about how terrible experience they had, putting a link to this person. As the result, this person would always be at the top of searches for glasses. Duh. So let's stick a little bit in the issue about elections and why is it that we cannot really predict elections. It has to do with how high stakes are related to the issue you try to search. In our case for elections, elections are extremely important, as we all know. So there are a lot of people who would like to influence the outcome. In fact, I think it's so important that I have created this kind of unpredictability theorem in quotes, because it's not really a theorem, but the idea is that if we were able to predict elections through social media correctly, there will be so much interest from other parties that they would mess up your data so as to make prediction impossible. If, for example, people knew that you would believe what the social media say about the elections and vote that way, because we are all influenced by what we hear in social media, then all you have to do is just mess up with social media. So we really cannot do that. And I saw in another case, in the elections of a senatorial race in Massachusetts in 2010, the similar event in Twitter. There, I coined the term Twitter bomb for the following reason. Massachusetts is a very democratic state in the United States. It's by and large the majority vote Democratic. And in 2009, a long-term senator, one of the longest-term senators, Senator Kennedy died, so the seat was for grabs. But the Republicans did not seem that they had any chance. This is a democratic state, and the most important Democratic senator is to be replaced. It seems like they had no chance. Yet, there was a group that actually tried to influence and spread misinformation on Twitter very effectively, in fact, and that was by spreading false information, create automatically a bunch of accounts on Twitter and spreading this information before Twitter was able to figure them out and track them down. And if you want to know more about that, I have written this paper in Science that describes the whole situation. It was who was doing that? It was not a group from Massachusetts, in fact. It was a group from Iowa. Iowa from Massachusetts is about as far as London is from Athens. So it's somebody quite far away who had the ability, or at least the attempt, to influence election in a far away state. And I have no idea if people were really persuaded by this kind of information. All I know is that they successfully tried to do that. And that is, a serious problem to worry. If you're not well educated, if you're not careful and understanding about how we really are making decisions, we are probably going to make some of the same mistakes in the future. So let me go into some positive results. How do you predict then elections? Well, it's not really magic. You really need to do your job carefully, and that job means figure out your input, make sure that you have the right kind of input, tell in advance how you will collect data, not after the fact, filter them carefully, figure out which in fact are the data that are giving you the right signal, determine the algorithm that you will do the search before the fact, and describe what are the semantics of the analysis. That is, how will you be able to tell what you're predicting if you do not have a theory that explains how things are predicting? So Why is that important? Why all of these steps are important? It has to do with the fact that we are dealing with society and not with nature. I'm sure that nobody doubts that if I drop this cap from here, it will go down. May not exactly in the same spot, but it's not going to go far away. It's never going to go up. Nature is not playing games with us. All the techniques we have developed to study nature, we try to make them apply into society. But society is not behaving exactly like nature. For example, I don't know if you agree with me so far from what you have heard or not, but I know that you're already thinking a little differently than the way you were thinking before you entered the room. Agreeing or not, the fact that you have heard something that I said, and maybe something that the person next to you said as I was speaking, or something you remembered that you may have forgotten, has already changed your attitude. In this case, that cap in society would not have gone down all the time. It might have floated, it might have gone up. So we're using this kind of highly sophisticated techniques, very often coming from statistics, from physics. And we try to apply them in an environment which has a lot of surprises. If we do not pay attention to this detail, we're going to get ourselves in trouble. So we get into troubles with Google bombs, Twitter bombs, and other things like the prehab Twitter factory that I'm not going to refer to it right now, but I can refer to it later. So these are some of the papers that might find interesting if you want to know more about it. So how do you predict social media? You find your data, you make sure that you understand how society changes over time, and importantly, have a theory why you think your observations will be correct. Just because you are dealing with big data, there is this kind of fascination with big data. The OMG factor in argot in English means, oh my God, you know, I looked at this and this is what data tells me. No, data does not tell you anything. Data tells you sometimes what you want to see, not necessarily what it is there, the data that come from society. In fact, we could have what I call the self-deceptive syndrome. That is, we might be able to deceive ourselves. I had some experience with that when I was doing my research. When I started collecting the data, and I knew what was the answer, there were times into the data collection that I could see the answer right there. You know, doing some kind of particular machine learning application, I could find the answer. I had the choice of stopping right there, because I found what I'm supposed to find, right? In nature, we do that. If our simulation depicts what happens in nature, we say, we arrived, we analyze the phenomenon. But it's not necessarily like that. It could be that your analysis was incorrect. And later on, I had another example with the looking at the sentiment analysis. So you have a choice of where exactly do you stop the analysis. And that is not an obvious choice. You stop the analysis when you're absolutely sure that you have done the right calculation, but also that you have a theory that explains why things work the way that you observe seeing. Without theory, you haven't done much. When it comes to election in particular, we should be a little clear that just a tweet is not equivalent to a user, and a user is not equivalent to an eligible voter. And an eligible voter is not a voter. Somebody might have the right to vote and not vote. But it is the last kind who decide elections, the voters. And we're just looking at 2 degrees of indirection with incomplete mapping, and we try to find the answer there. So that's not the case. This has happened in the past. In fact, back in the 20s and 30s, there was a magazine in the United States that thought that they could predict the elections, and they actually miserably failed. So my colleague wrote this article, Don't Turn Social Media into Another Literary Digest Poll. But then, that's part of the story. The other part is that even if you have the right theory and you do the right calculations, the world around you might change when you're not paying attention. The case in point has to do with the detecting the flu trend. So this is one of the great successes in doing detection. We know that you can actually figure out where there is a flu epidemic just by looking at what people are searching. Because the idea is that when somebody is searching for symptoms of flu, runny nose and cold and fever, it's very likely that this person has a problem to solve. His child maybe is getting sick and does not know what to do with the child. Something needs to happen. So in this case, when you're looking at, let's say, in Kalithea, in this neighborhood, there are a lot of searches that are asking for symptoms that have to do with flu, it's very likely that there is an epidemic right here and people trying to figure out what happens. Nevertheless, this idea was shut down last year, 2013, I think it was 2 years ago, when people got panicked because Google were telling them that a huge epidemic was coming, and that was not the case. Unfortunately, Google had gotten way off. The actual measurement of flu was close to 6%, and Google was measuring close to 11%. So doubled the expected rate, and as a result, people were going crazy thinking that something terrible is happening because, hey, Google says so. What was the problem? The problem was that for a long time, the searches and the actual results were mapping very quickly, and only suddenly there was a change in peak. The reason actually had to do with the small change that happened within Google, in just the other building of where people were standing. So there is one building that was doing the search business, and there was another building that was doing the prediction business, but the two people were not talking to each other. The problem was that the searches had introduced this kind of related searches. So you search from flu complications, here are other things that you might be interested in searching. So made it very easy for you. Once you search for that, maybe you want to search for this and for that and for that. That is, the interface itself was helping you to increase the searches by and large, effectively giving the impression to the people in the next building that, my God, there is a huge epidemic happening right now. Look how people behave. So small changes that supposedly were not central to the prediction were actually messing up our data. In other words, things are really complicated with predictions. We have a long way to go. There are different models which we already know can perform well, and here are some of these models. Number one, economists have the idea of prediction markets that they believe very heavily. And prediction markets are based in the idea that if you would like to predict something, you better bet your money that this will happen. So in a prediction market, you are actually making a bet that you will get the prediction. When you have something at stake, like your own money, then you have a chance to actually get less messed up data. It's not always possible, but at least that's one idea. Another is to create survey models. That is, if you want to figure out what people believe, you may want to actually ask them about that. That's what pollsters are doing. And maybe you don't want to ask them the one obvious question, but if you can ask them questions that will actually give you the answer, this is a good way to go. A third is to just use statistical models, observe past performance, and then try to figure out what is the baseline in the past. When nothing happens, what does the world look like? That will help you detect changes in behavior in the future. That is, instead of trying to read the absolute answer, read the difference between the current result and the baseline you have observed for a long time. And maybe a combination of all of this. This is a paper that has many more details about these three models. So, at the interest of time, I will stop here. And I would be very happy to answer any questions you may have. I will stick around also if you would like to see me in the corridor and ask me more specific questions. And to also, you can find information about me if you go to bit.ly pmetaxas. And I have created these shortcuts for some of the papers I refer to. Thank you.
Any questions?
Thanks for the presentation. I really enjoyed it coming from another type of domain. So the question that I would like to ask you is the following. You use the word prediction. In a technical sense, it sounds to be more like an estimation, because prediction essentially includes dynamics. Your dynamics here are quite static. So if you want to do estimation based on the current, for example, in the paradigm of elections. I mean, in the traditional technical fields, we know the fundamental laws of physics, just like you said. We are using them and we are utilizing them. In this case, we don't have fundamental laws of physics, so I would expect that those who provide the fundamentals would be social scientists, would be linguists, and these are going to give us the cues that are because essentially you are doing statistical analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Along the same way, we have also in dynamics a similar social problem. For example, if you try to trace the people walking on Sydenham Square, although there are the laws of physics induced there, also you have the brain intruding. So you use learning. So I assume that in such type of cases, if you utilize the fundamentals of social science or linguistics with some form of learning, you might be getting something, or not.
Yeah, thanks very much. That's exactly the direction I'm trying to go. In fact, I'm trying to coin a new term, which I call social theorem. And by social theorem, I mean something that could have some applicability for things you have not seen yet, some estimation for things that you have not seen yet, but your results will be coming with a statistical validity. To give you an example of one of the social theorems I work currently on, and I have some pretty encouraging results. What can you say about the way that true rumors and false rumors propagate? Is there anything that you could say that do they propagate differently? And one thing that could come as a social theorem could be that even though both true rumors and false rumors propagate, false rumors usually, statistically usually, have much shorter and more challenged lives. And why? Now that's what I'm trying to prove. And in fact, I can show you the system that we have developed. It's called Twitter trails, and we do that for a collection of information that's being propagated these days. Why would that work? It would work because it's based on maybe a Socratic old theory that people ουδής κακός, people are not willingly bad. The majority of people would not try to tell a lie knowingly that this is a lie. It's not that nobody will do. I'm sure we have all met people that they will lie. It's not that they will not do it at any time. People, when they are under stress, they might lie. But the more people are exposed and they are asked to transmit information, the more likely it is that you will find questioning. So that is an example in which you are using machine learning along with the theory that comes from social science that says that the crowd can be trusted much more than an individual expert overall. Because that's something we have observed in social science the last 100-something years, that you could find that the majority of people are much more reliable very often than the best experts. So that's an example. I think computational social science has a very bright future, and one of the reasons that I have this belief is because it will be able to formalize and test and verify theorems, social theorems like that. It is really dealing with hard problems. Coming from theory, you know, when I hear the term hard problem, I'm thinking NP complete and, you know, these type of things. These are hard problems in this sense, but the really hard problems are societal problems. You know, if you really want to deal with a tough problem, look at poverty. How do you deal with poverty? That's really hard. It's, you know, NP complete is trivial in front of them, right? So what's happening? How do you deal with problems like that? Computation certainly can help. Technology certainly can help, but it's not enough. Just because you have technology, just because you will, let's say, throw an iPad on the lap of every student in every village and town in Greece, it's not going to solve the problem of education. We know that. We don't try to solve it like that. In many other parts, however, of technology, all you need is just streamline, put things in an assembly line, and hopefully it will work. Sorry for the long answer.
Thank you, Apollonianakis, I have gotten your point and your message, and I would like to ask you to return back to the slide showing the Google user interface, the search engine, with the flu prediction case study.
Mm-hmm. This one?
The next
the next one, this one, yeah.
No, it's the slide where you show the Google, the change in the Google search engine user interface.
Ah, here.
Now, let me ask you whether you are aware of any studies which have proven that had this change not been made, the prediction would be accurate.
What I know is that the time of the change happened exactly at the time in which the interface changed. So, and as far as we know, that was the only thing that changed.
But then, filtering out the duplicate clicks should effectively get you back to the normal standard, which would allow you to predict the flu correctly.
Not if you're not aware of the change and readjust your estimation, which is what has happened now. Now Google predicts again, but what they did is, now that they're aware of the change, they fixed it.
So they did not filter out the duplicate clicks?
They did not. They were not aware. As I said, people were not talking to each other. And I have another example, in fact, that happened the same way.
Let me just
oh, yes, yes.
It might not be just that.
Yeah.
It might not be just that.
So, yeah.
Meaning that the data might have
shifted themselves.
Might have problems themselves,
yes.
Which make it unable to predict.
Yes.
Because
so
it would be easy for Google to take out the duplicate data and then claim that my search is appropriate and therefore I could predict the flu had the change not been made.
You're absolutely right. In order to make an accurate estimate, you would like to have a controlled experiment in which you would like to have two universes.
It's called conspiracy. That's what you say, right?
You would like to make, you know, two.
Pharmaceutical conspiracy, don't you say that?
I think that the experiment was wrong.
So what we know, as I said, is that once they make the adjustments, it came back into the right levels. There wasn't any particular at that time happening to make them believe that something else was happening. We know that the people admitted that they messed up and they went to fix it. There are some other statistical explanations that provide part of the answer, that maybe the model of fitness they were using was overfitted and they actually, trying to make the prediction even more accurate, eventually they messed it up. One can never be sure. There are, however, to be absolutely sure, you would like to have two universes, one in a controlled environment, the other in the real life, and see how the different things behave. But of course, we cannot have this kind of parallel universe that everything works the same way except of that. Or maybe we can. There is another amazing experiment that Duncan Watts and his colleagues did in Yahoo Labs a few years ago, in which they tried to figure out whether popularity, let's say in songs, is absolutely determined by quality. In other words, when a song becomes popular, this happened because the song was really great. Everybody liked it, and there was no other way but this song to actually become popular. So what did they do? They created a site that had actually 8 sites, like 8 parallel universes. One of them, all of them were providing the same 50 songs. And you could go and download them anytime you want. Some of them had comments about what people thought were the good songs. Some others had information about which songs have been downloaded more often than others. And in some universes, there was no information, with just the song downloaded or not. And they started counting to see how often people would download songs. What they found in these 8 universes was that not every universe was agreeing in which was the better song. It was never the case that some song that ended up in the top 5 in one universe ended up in the bottom 5 in the other universe. But very often you would have a song that was second or third in one universe and was 20th in another one. So people were influenced by what they thought others believed. And in fact, the whole idea of advertisement is based exactly on this idea. How do you know that Toyota Yaris is a good car? All it takes is a friend of yours to tell you that it is a good car and see an advertisement of somebody that looks like a professional telling you that this is a good car. That's how we form opinion. So there are many different explanations to happen, and it is not that we cannot actually do measurements. It's just much more complicated. But we shouldn't, just because these problems are hard, I hope you appreciate that, it doesn't mean that we can not keep pursuing. At the end of the day, we learn more about our species in some sense. We learn more about how humans operate and how we think. And we may eventually, I have this optimistic view that we might become a little calmer about the greatness of the human race, because we can be fooled rather easily, I would say. So, in my opinion, for the elections, I'm very pessimistic that anytime soon we will actually be able to do this kind of prediction. As I said, and the major reason is that this is extremely high stakes issue, and there will be people wanting to influence what you believe. The majority of people seems that they like to be the winners, with the winners. So if you hear that this political party is winning, you are, kind of more likely to vote for it if you do not feel very strongly about what you would vote for. So, but we know that. I mean, what the politicians are doing, what the newspapers are doing, what the advertisers are trying to persuade us that you should vote for them, because it's high stakes. For the influenza and the other epidemics, CDC is still measuring epidemics the same way. This has not changed. If, however, you are able to forecast what happens in terms of health problems a week in advance, you could have a great gain. Why? Because highly transmittable diseases have this kind of exponential growth of transmission. So if you have no idea, let's say, that there is an Ebola crisis in that particular part of the world, and you wait for a week to learn that, you could have lost a tremendous amount of time trying to solve the problem later on. And the reason is that in this week, people will be coming in contact, they will be flying from place to place to place. And so you would have to deal not with a local problem, but with a global one. And if it takes a while for the virus to actually reveal itself or to become transmittable, then the problem might go far in the future. So you have a benefit to learn as early as possible because of this kind of exponential growth of diseases. People don't always understand that. They find it surprising that there is so much noise, let's say, about this epidemic, and I haven't seen anything. Why they are all talking about that? And in a week, it seems like a third of the population has the problem, and you're thinking like, how on earth? What did the government do? Well, exponential growth has this effect. A week later, if you have exponential growth, on a daily basis, a week later it's too late. And a week before it was, not even detectable. So we have every reason to try to detect. My message is you also have to be aware of all the problems that can come along the way and try to create the theory, create the measurements, create a control environment as much as you can, because these are really hard problems.
Or adapt the theory to the particular cases.
What I kept understanding is that by looking at the bigger picture, like using computational social science, you understand something objective, something that maybe is true. But doing that, are we kind of assuming that the individuals behave rationally? I mean, it's like in cases where you try to find a equilibrium in a strategic network. It doesn't work like that. The players are not always rational, right? So why focusing on computational social science and not computational cognitive science and neuroeconomics and stuff that are mainly about how the individual person behaves? And then, it's maybe combined with the social.
Thanks for the question. I don't claim that this is the only way of approaching the problem. Certainly, there are people who are trying at the individual level. And I don't really claim, I don't even believe that people are always rational creatures. I mean, there's nothing further than true. We are creatures that we are able to think logically. So we have demonstrated an ability of thinking logically. For example, when we solve a math problem. But most of the time in our lives, we're not really behaving logically. How? Well, when you're in love, you know you're not thinking logically. At least you do not know. Everybody else around you knows that. Right? When you are in stress, when you are in fear, you definitely don't think logically. When you have some kind of serious economic benefit or damage, you don't think logically. In computational social science, it's looking at the behavior of the crowd, and it's not trying to make decisions at the individual level. If at some point, and when at some point, I guess, we are able to actually understand the way our brain works better, we can probably go to the individual level. But for the moment, we will probably try many different approaches. So it is definitely worth trying new things, because that's the only way we will eventually figure out what is going on. I think what we learn is that the naive approach that people will always do what is good for them or what's good for others, it's not really the case. And with this field, we can actually measure it. how often is it that we are not behaving logically?
Very interesting talk. I would like a reflection on the future. In 5 to 10 years from now, given the fact that more and more devices, people are going to be interconnected, Google will gather much more big data. Even the food on our fridge will be collected as big data. And this will give Google a very strong advantage on forging behaviors, on forming opinions, and perhaps misforming them in order to be used maliciously by other people. So, what do you think of how, as individuals, can protect ourselves? What do you see in 10 years? And last, can you tell us the story of the negative paper?
So, these days it seems like there is not a week passing that I will not receive a phone call from some reporter wanting me to answer this question in particular, wanting me to tell whether I believe that Google should be nationalized and its data be under protection and so on and so forth. Because there is always this fear. I have not touched the issue of privacy, by the way. This is not an issue of the talk. This is an issue of a whole conference and 2 and 3. These are extremely complicated problems that there are no easy solutions. How we understand what we lose by this connectivity. What we know is that it is an innate desire to communicate. So one of the major characteristics of humans is that they want to communicate. We really cannot live in isolation. In fact, the way we punish people is to keep them in isolation. The worst thing you can do to a human is take them away from the rest. So what social web has achieved is providing the ability of communicating, and maybe we see that this communication maybe is going too far. For example, it's happening all the time. It's difficult to concentrate. I hope that those of you who are students and taking exams, you don't try to be on Facebook at the same time that you're studying, because I'm telling you, it's not going to work. We know that it can go too far. We can get too easily distracted. We can give away our personal data very easily, happily in fact. And when you're older, you kind of become a little wiser about that. But when you're a teenager, you hope that somebody will pay attention to you. So you're willing to tell them anything about you, hoping that somebody will say, hey, that's an interesting guy, let me talk about him, right? But things change later on in life. So it is extremely difficult to make particular predictions. One of the things I will say is that the search engines gain much greater power by knowing more things about us. But I worry these days far less that Google might take the wrong turn. It will have terrible implications for Google, and everybody will observe that Google is trying actually to manipulate the search data. I'm much more worried that Facebook can do that. And why is that? Well, Facebook has demonstrated that actually is running experiments that can affect behavior and kind of tune our behavior. A recent example that you may have read is that they can make you post more positive, more optimistic postings if they give you more positive and optimistic input. So they effectively can do that. They also have shown that by telling you who of your friends voted in these days' elections has an influence in making you go out and vote. It will not tell you what to vote, but make it more possible that you will actually get out of your seat and go to the voting station and vote. Well, if it has this ability, then it could, and because it can detect who's, let's say, with which party, they could have a running experiment in which they will only influence particular segment of society to vote without encouraging the others, and thus influence, let's say, elections in this kind of indirect way, and there would be no way for us to detect it. One of the reasons that you did not see me having any results from Facebook is because Facebook will not allow you to get any of the results, and Twitter does, and Google does. But Facebook is keeping everything underneath. So The closest you will see me going into kind of a conspiracy theory, though I do not see one right now, is that there is a possibility of this happening in the future. And that's, if I were to attempt, one of the worries, that would be the thing that worries me at this point.
If nobody has a question, then maybe I can ask a question. Okay.
Thank you for being here today. Generally, in any prediction, whether if you have to predict if a car is moving with a stable speed or whether an asteroid is going to hit the Earth, a particular asteroid after 10 years. In order to solve both problems, we have to have the appropriate tools for these. Both problems are solved by equations. The first problem, the car problem, the equations are easy, but about the asteroid problem, the equations are much more complex. Both problems are problems of nature. Right? Society is something that's is part of nature. Society. Bees, for example, and that's is something. It's nature, and they live in a society. So before you said that it's hard to predict society because it's different from nature. But I think that we don't have the tools yet in order to predict society. We can, but I don't know in how many years, but someday, but maybe long ago, we can predict. Is that right?
Well, science is that weird field that loves to be proven wrong. One of the most exciting things that happens in science is when a new paper comes out or a new discovery comes out and says, what we used to believe is wrong. This is something better. So I would be delighted to be proven wrong because it meant that we have moved past that stage. What I meant when I said that, the nature is different than society, I meant that the laws of nature as we understand them, that is observing how the natural laws operate, is something that does not change. We may not understand them completely, but it's not playing games with that. That was the experiment, the example with that. It will always go down. But society, it's been, comprised of natural creatures like us, is changing behavior by the passing of information. Information is something that's not easily understood. Any other physical object, if I give it to you, you will have it, I will not. At this point, I have said something, you have said something, and we both know that. We have made a copy. That's something which is unique in nature. This kind of ability of making copies, and none of the participants loses the original. That's what I meant by the difference in society.
So how to learn the mechanism? It's really hard, but we have to learn.
Yeah, it will take a while. I hope I will be alive by that time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I get a signal here that we've enjoyed for too long this nice presentation of yours and the interesting questions. So I think we have to close the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Γεια σου. Χάρηκα που ήρθες. Χάρηκα που σε είδα, όπως πάντα.
Υπάρχει περίπτωση να κάνουμε ένα excursion στο New England κάποια στιγμή να άνοιξει ένα σύνδεσο αυτός. Να σε καλά. Να σε καλά.
Τι μου κάνεις? ευχαριστώ.
Ναι, αν μπορείτε να μας δώσετε θα είναι πολύ καλό. Έχετε κάποιο φλασάκι, κάτι? Θέλω. Μισό λεπτάκι. Τι είναι κάτω, ρε?
Δεν κάνω σε
Στον καλό πήγαινε. Κάνει αν μαλλιάκι. Χωρίς μπάλα. Χωρίς την μπάλα. Α, είσαι ο τελευταίος. Αυτή, σε μισή ώρα. Όχι, είναι αρκετά session, είναι 5 μαζί θα παρουσιάσουν. Ο ένας μετά τον άλλο. Το όνομά σας? Το όνομά σας?
Είναι δύσκολο να το προφέρω.
Εδώ να βοηθήσετε εσείς λίγο, επειδή έχω να λύσω ένα πρόβλημα στη Στελίνα με το πρόγραμμα, να καταγράψουμε ποιοι είναι οι ομιλητές. Ναι, και να μου πείτε αν υπάρχει κάποιος που λείπει. Να του φορτώσουμε τα PowerPoint σας. Εδώ. Είσαι Αλεξάνδρου. Μια χαρά, έχετε κάνει. Είδα και το mail που έστειλες για το WISE, αλλά δεν έχω απαντήσει.
Και εγώ δεν θυμάμαι.
Έψαχνες να βρεις την απόδειξη και την πληρωμή και τη συγχωρία.
Νομίζω ότι όλα είναι
εντάξει. Απάντησαν,
είμαι εντάξει, ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ.
Τίποτα, χαρά μου σε γνωρίζω.
Θα δούμε και την επόμενη εβδομάδα.
Αν θέλετε μπορείτε να ανέβετε και να το δείτε κιόλας. Δεν είναι... Ναι, να την περάσουμε τώρα.
Είστε πρώτοι. Εντάξει.
Περάσουμε την επόμενη.
Θα περάσω όλες τα μέσα από τον υπολογιστή και θα σας δώσουμε ένα τέλος στην δική μου, με τον Ανισελή να δει.
Η πρώτη. Ναι. Και αν χρειάζεται PDF για να την ανεβάσετε, την παίρνετε. Εντάξει.
Απλά το λάπτοπ... Έχει ένα λάπτοπ. Είναι μπαταρία... Εντάξει, Δεν έχει. Όχι, ρωτάω, δεν τσέκαρα. Ας πω αλήθεια. Το όνομα σου?
Χρήστος Σαρδιανός. Σωστό. Η πρώτη που το πετυχαίνεις με τη μία.
Τι πάθη θες παρουσιάζεις?
Δεύτερος. Εντάξει, ευχαριστώ.
Παρουσιάστε και ξεχασάκια.
Όχι, αυτό είναι για το point.
Οκ.
Γράφουμε μετά.
Εντάξει, ωραία. Αυτό να ξεχάσουμε.
Να ρωτήσω, θέλει κάποια ρύθμιση σε ένα...
Όχι. Κανονικά... Έχει θέμα adapt, δεν νομίζω.
PowerPoint, έχεις keynote.
Ναι, PowerPoint.
Για να δούμε. Εδώ και present, αυτό κάναμε πριν.
Μα είναι σαν να μην τον πιάνει το τέτοιο.
Μήπως να άλλα.
Θέλετε να μου δώσετε λίγο το δικό σας τον adapter να τσεκάρουμε, μήπως θα απολυφθεί.
Δεν πιστεύω ότι φταίει, αλλά...
Είναι στα settings.
Ναι, αυτό ήθελα να δω, στα system preferences.
Είναι οι οθόνες.
Έχει κάποια ρύθμιση εκεί.
Κανονικά πρέπει να πιάσει device εδώ πέρα. Εσάς το πιάνει το... Α, δεν είναι το Ευθύνα.
Ναι, 1-2, ναι.
Ναι, ναι. 1-2. 1-2. 1-2.
Πότε μας πεις ένα φλασάκι. Την κάνουμε έτσι.
Ναι.
Γιατί δεν...
1-2.
Δεν πιάνει τη...
1-2.
Έχετε ή θέλετε να...
Ναι, ναι.
Εγώ θέλω. Ναι, 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 ναι.
Το κάνω.
Εντάξει.
Για να δούμε στα... Πού είναι τα settings.
Ωραία. Ήθελε ξανά, Είμαστε εντάξει, τέλεια.
Ωραία, σας την αφήνω.
Ωραία, και μετά παίζει και το point. Έλα. Όχι,
Εσείς τι είστε, η Αλεξάνδρα...
Μιχώτα.
Ωραία. Σε βλέπω ήρθε.
Όχι, δεν το έχω ξεχάσει, μου είπε να το αφαιρέσω. Δεν παίρνεις αυτά, μήπως κατά λάθος. Αυτό δουλεύει, όχι. Α, εντάξει. Δουλεύει.
Αρκεί να ανταλλάσσεις μόνο σου αυτό το πράγμα. Δεν μπορείς να το κάνεις σωστά δεδομένα, κάνοντας σύμφωνος μια την αλήθεια. Αν το βάζεις να το πριν 20 χρόνια, το έκανε είναι 100 χρόνια. Και όπως στα αμερικανικές κρίσης, τότε να βάζεις ένα
Η εμπειρία. Έχω, ναι.
Ξέρω ότι είμαι λίγο πιεστική, αλλά φαντάζομαι δεν θα θέλετε να μείνετε με μία ώρα και σας κλέσει το πρόγραμμα το Σάββατο, το απόγευμα στις 7 να ακούτε παρουσιάσεις. Οπότε καλό είναι να ξεκινήσουμε.
Θα προσπαθήσω να είμαι στην ώρα μου. Hello, my name is Alexandra Michota and I am PhD candidate at the University of Piraeus. My research has been done in cooperation with the professor of the University of Piraeus, Mr. Katsika Sokratis. I am going to be speaking to you today about the evolution of privacy by default in social networks. Social networking sites tend to make their default privacy settings public. In this presentation, we focus on comparing the changes in default privacy settings of the two topmost leading social networks on an annual basis that started in 2005 and ended in 2010. We performed a user survey among Facebook and LinkedIn users, comparing the current interfaces with those of the older versions, and we also examined the usability of their latest versions. We performed two user studies in Facebook and LinkedIn, and the results of this examination indicate that the default privacy settings tend to become progressively more liberal, and they also highlight a number of usability problems. As seen, this presentation consists of 7 parts. In the first part, we will discuss about the privacy in social networks in general. In the second and in the third part, I will talk to you about the architecture of privacy settings for each social network and their sharing content. The fourth and the fifth part are connected. The fourth part includes radar diagrams that describe in detail the evolution of the default privacy settings for both social networks, while in the fifth part we will see why this evolution occurs and how many usability problems have been created because of it. In the sixth part, the results of the user study confirm our hypothesis, and finally, this presentation is concluded with the part 7. The title of this slide poses a question: social or private? Sociality has always required some voluntary abandonment of our privacy. In order for someone to become social, he must give up some of his private time and space so as to share it with others. But privacy in social networking sites is defined as the disclosure limitation of the shared content to the SNS user. When we say SNS, is social networking site users. The members in social networks are connected to one each other and they share content. Content like photos, posts, real-life connections, etc. You will be wondering why we chose these two social networks for our survey. While Facebook is particularly focused on personal self-promotion, LinkedIn's interface caters towards the need for professional self-promotion. Both social networks use similar principles of connectivity and strategies that can be successfully revealed in the interface changes. This similarity is the subject of research interest and has been the reason why we selected these two particular social networks for our survey. In this slide, we can see in detail the architecture of privacy settings in Facebook. The privacy shortcuts menu is a new feature that was added for the first time in Facebook's interface on December 2012 and gave the user quick access to the privacy controls with certain settings that are also available in the privacy settings main menu. The privacy settings main menu have 3 major options. These are privacy, timeline and tagging, and blocking. Common settings between the 3 major options of the privacy settings menu and the privacy shortcuts menu are highlighted in purple outline in this figure. For instance, the privacy setting page have 2 options. Who can look me up option and the who can see my stuff option that is also available in the privacy shortcuts menu. LinkedIn takes a completely different approach with regards to privacy controls. It controls what a viewer can see, whether he has a paid or a free account. In this presentation, we focus on the default privacy settings of a free account. As we can see, there is only one way to pass to change the privacy settings. From the LinkedIn homepage, the privacy settings is included at the account settings drop-down main menu. Here we can see the abundance of information that a user can share in his profile page in both social networks. This is for Facebook and this is for LinkedIn. It is worthwhile to mention that the naming that was used for the description of the information that the user shares in a social network follows the available options of the current interface of both social networks. Social networking sites offer choices for visibility levels. In the next slide, we can see analytically these choices. We designed this table for our survey. The visibility of the shared content is classified in 5 levels. A numerical value for each exposure level can be derived by mapping the visibility levels into equally distributed percentage values with an increment step of 20%. More specifically, the option of only me represents the minimum content exposure level of 20%, and the option of everyone or public represents the maximum content exposure level of 100%. Let's continue with the radar diagrams that describe the evolution of the default privacy settings year by year. These charts were used to examine the visibility levels for each content item on an annual basis, starting from 2005 until 2013. All the radar charts we have designed have 9 axes. Each axis represents the start of the year, and the distance between 2 serial axes represents a 1-year period. Then the visibility values are connected by lines, and as we can see, polygonal shapes are created by these lines. The blue line is for Facebook and the green line is for LinkedIn. In this chart, we can see the visibility of profile content in Facebook and LinkedIn, and it is apparent that with the passing of time, only Facebook changed the privacy of the user's content from friends of friends to public. From friends of friends to public. The activity feed is one of the most popular activities in both social networks. In Facebook, the activity feed displays stories when a user interacts with content, such as play or like. Although this service remained private for LinkedIn, Facebook made this feature visible to everyone since 2010. Everyone's personal email and physical addresses, phone numbers have been hidden from their profiles in Facebook. The visibility level is only friends. Sensitive information in social networks includes the dates of birth. It can be easily understood that such types of information fields should not be accessible by others. But Facebook and LinkedIn service providers let this information exposed to friends of friends in Facebook since 2007 and in LinkedIn since 2009. Your name, gender, profile, photo, and industry are public by default in Facebook since 2008 and in LinkedIn since 2011. The same default privacy settings applied for the other information field. And from 2009, Facebook made your friend list public by default. Nevertheless, LinkedIn kept this information private during all the examined period. The results. The default privacy settings of each shared content item tend to approach or to reach the exposure level of 100% public. The exception to the rule was the birthday and the contact details, the visibility levels of this information. In LinkedIn, the data exposure level is lower than that of Facebook, and the setting your connection that represents the exposure level of 40% seems to be the dominant choice. Let's define what usability is. Usability is the effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction with which specific user can achieve a specific set of tasks in particular environment. The common definition says that easy to complete tasks makes user happy. In this slide, we can see the 3 usability factors we used for our survey. There are 3 questions. The first question is for the factor of effectiveness. Can users successfully use website to find information and accomplish some tasks? The second for efficiency. How quickly can user perform tasks? And the third for satisfaction after completing their tasks, do the user have a good feeling about the use of the interface? How usable is the access control mechanism for the privacy settings menu in Facebook? This user may get confused when they try to find the right option to limit the visibility levels of their sharing content. For example, the second user on the left is wondering why Facebook used the naming of staff. What does this probably mean? Based on a locally implemented showcase and real Facebook and LinkedIn profiles, we performed 2 user studies. The first in Facebook with 100 Greek young adults aged between 18 to 34 years old, and the second in LinkedIn with 45 adults of the same age group. Users were requested to perform some privacy-related tasks and answer some questions in the questionnaires we designed. The questionnaires were shared to the users through inboxes. In any usability test, the performance shown by the test participant is measured with regards to effectiveness and efficiency. The primary indicator we used for the effectiveness is the number of the user who completed the tasks, and the indicators we used for the efficiency were the task completion time and the number of clicks. Here we can see the workflow for our usability test. The main aim of the usability test was the monitoring of the user's behavior. Here we can see the tasks in usability test. We have 10 privacy-related tasks in Facebook and 8 privacy-related tasks in LinkedIn. The tasks were designed in such a way so as the results of their analysis to be comparable. The reason why Facebook study has 2 more tasks than LinkedIn is that Facebook offers a wider variety of services than LinkedIn. As seen in these 2 charts, the overwhelming majority of the users managed to complete all the tasks successfully as requested. According to these two charts, even if the task accomplishment levels were quite high, it is proven that the task solving was slightly difficult as the participant accessed many more pages than the necessary. It is also apparent from these two charts that the participant experienced some difficulties in completing some of the tasks as they spent much more time than the necessary. The results indicate that although the majority of the users managed to accomplish successfully all the tasks, they experienced some difficulties in performing some of them. This is evident from the high number of clicks they needed for searching and finding the right menus and the choices to perform them. Here there are some recommendations for improvement of the social networking platforms. In order to improve the interfaces of both social networks, it would be better if both social networks could use the same naming for identical data types. For example, LinkedIn uses the term of connection, that is an unfamiliar term for Facebook users that they are used to call their connections friends. The second recommendation is about the data types that should be categorized according to their content. It's difficult for the users to remember different categories for the same data types, depending on the social network they have logged in. And the last improvement, improvement of link placements. It would be very important if LinkedIn could use an easy view of the privacy setting menu and not within the account and setting menu. It is not a coincidence that except for the changes of default privacy settings, the frequency of differentiating the classification of the SNS user's personal data and the architecture of privacy settings have also changed. The procedures seem to be confusing for the users, and the usability issues that arise create more and more concerns to them. Thank you.
Thanks for your nice presentation. I'm just wondering to know about.
Maybe it's not working.
You were talking about default privacy policy setting. I'm just wondering to know about what is the baseline of default privacy policy setting. Is it a legal document, privacy policy, or agreement? Because I read about 2 weeks ago that Google and Facebook has been warned about exposing private information. So do you know something about what is the baseline of default privacy policy setting?
Do you mean if these changes are according to the privacy policies of social networking sites? Is this your question? The privacy policies is one of the subjects that of my research, and I think that all the policies are very confusing, and there is a cause of it because the user can't understand what the policies say, so it's easier for the service providers to make changes in privacy settings menu or in the sharing content without caring for the users.
Hello. Your survey was very interesting. I have a question for the future. Which is the next step of this survey?
The next step of my survey is to design a prototype model with an interface with usable privacy controls that make the management of privacy for the users easier.
Hi, Sotiris Ioannidis from Fourth. I got a question for you. So you did the study and you have your results and whatnot, and ideally you want these results to be incorporated in LinkedIn and in Facebook, right? So
right.
That's the ideal scenario. Now, before they incorporate anything in Facebook or LinkedIn or any real site, they need to go through a lot of testing, and they actually need to see how much it's going to cost. So do you have any idea what it would take a real company like Facebook and LinkedIn to actually incorporate your suggestions?
Do you mean why I used these two real social networking platforms other than a test interface?
No, I'm saying that it's great that you did your study there. I'm just asking, okay, you have your study. Is it possible for Facebook to actually take your results and do something with them?
Yeah, of course. That's why there are the recommendations in order to improve the platforms, but I'm not sure if Facebook wants to take into account this recommendation of all the researchers.
But is it something that is easy for Facebook to incorporate or something completely impossible?
Yes, it's very easy, but there is a gap between the sociality and privacy. So a social network doesn't want to be private. That's the reason why the abundance of information is shared to everyone by default, year by year. But it's easy to incorporate every improvement we suggest.
So it's not the cost?
It's not the cost. No, it's not the cost.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Alexander, for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Καλημέρα για μένα. Ονομάζομαι Σαρτιανός Χρήστος, είμαι από το Χαρκόπιο Πανεπιστήμιο. Θέλω να σας μιλήσω για μια έρευνα μιας scalable πρότασης personalized recommendations για users μεγάλης κλίμακας κοινωνικών δικτύων. Αλλά πριν φτάσουμε εκεί, τι σημαίνει αυτό? Η σύγχρονη τάση για τους χρήστες των web εφαρμογών είναι, εκτός από το να αλληλεπιδρούν με τις ίδιες εφαρμογές, να αφήνουν πίσω τους είτε εν γνώση τους είτε εν αγνία τους κάποιο είδους κοινωνικό αποτύπωμα, όπως για παράδειγμα να μπω εγώ σε ένα site αξιολόγηση προϊόντων, αλλά εκτός από το να αξιολογήσω κάποια προϊόντα, να κάνω like ή να εμπιστευτώ τις κριτικές κάποιου άλλου χρήστη. Άρα, έστω και εν αγνία μου, συμμετέχω σε ένα κοινωνικό δίκτυο πέρα από του Facebook ή οτιδήποτε άλλο. Ο ρόλος λοιπόν ενός recommendation σύστημα, για τα οποία θα μιλήσουμε και εμείς, είναι να μπορέσει να προβλέψει και να προτείνει κατά συνέπεια στο χρήστη αντικείμενα που πιθανότατα θα είναι αρεστά σε αυτόν. Τι γίνεται τώρα με αυτό? Η δομή τους βασικά βασίζεται σε δύο οντότητες, τους χρήστες και τα αντικείμενα. Οι μεν χρήστες, από τη μία πλευρά, αξιολογούν τα εκάστοτε αντικείμενα και οι αξιολογήσεις τους αυτές κατατάσσονται σε ένα πίνακα utility matrix όπως αυτός εδώ. Ο στόχος λοιπόν του συστήματος παραγωγής συστάσεων είναι να προσπαθήσει να προβλέψει τα κενά που έχει αφήσει ο χρήστης για τα αντικείμενα που δεν έχει αξιολογήσει ακόμα και κατά συνέπεια να του προτείνει τα top πιο πιθανώς αρεστά στο χρήστη. Τώρα, οι γενικότερες προσεγγίσεις των recommender systems χωρίζονται σε τρεις κατηγορίες. Η μία είναι η κατηγορία του collaborative filtering με την οποία ασχοληθήκαμε και εμείς και η οποία στην ουσία προσπαθεί με κάποιο τρόπο να βρει ομοιότητα μεταξύ είτε των χρηστών είτε των αντικειμένων που αυτοί αξιολογούν και να φτάσει να τους προτείνει προτάσεις. Η δεύτερη κατηγορία των content-based συστημάτων βασίζεται περισσότερο στα features ή τις γενικότερες κατηγορίες που μπορεί να εντάσσονται τα αντικείμενα αυτά για να προσπαθήσει να βρει ομοιότητες μεταξύ των αντικειμένων που αρέσουν στους χρήστες και τα υβριδικά συστήματα συνδυάζουν ουσιαστικά προσεγγίσεις των δύο παραπάνω κατηγοριών. Ποιοι είναι οι βασικοί περιορισμοί τους οποίους θελήσαμε να προσεγγίσουμε? Ο ένας μόνιμος περιορισμός είναι οι cold start χρήστες για τους οποίους το σύστημα δεν έχει κάποια πληροφορία μέχρι τώρα και προσπαθεί να τους προτείνει εκ του μηδενός προτάσεις. Αυτό είναι μόνιμο στα συστήματα συστάσεων. Ο βασικός περιορισμός, ο οποίος θέλαμε να ασχοληθούμε εμείς, ήταν τι γίνεται με τα μεγάλης κλίμακας κοινωνικά δίκτυα. Παράδειγμα, το Facebook μπορούμε να δούμε ότι πλέον έχει παραπάνω από 1,5 δισεκατομμύριο χρήστες, άρα πώς είναι σε θέση ένα δίκτυο όπως το Facebook να φτάσει να παράξει προτάσεις για τους χρήστες του με αποδοτικό τρόπο. Άρα λοιπόν το βασικό ερώτημα μας είναι πώς αντιμετωπίζουμε το scalability σε τέτοια κλίμακας δίκτυα. Η πρότασή μας ήταν, μάλλον το ερώτημα από το οποίο ξεκινήσαμε, αν μπορούμε να χρησιμοποιήσουμε με κάποιο τρόπο όχι όλο τον γράφο των χρηστών, αλλά να κάνουμε scale down το πρόβλημα σε μικρότερου μεγέθους προβλήματα, λύνοντας το καθένα ξεχωριστά. Έτσι λοιπόν θελήσαμε να προσεγγίσουμε αν μπορούμε να εφαρμόσουμε τεχνικές collaborative filtering όχι στον πλήρη γράφο, αλλά σε υπογράφους αυτού. Για την προσέγγιση μας θεωρήσαμε ότι είναι σκόπιμο να εξετάσουμε αν μπορούμε να χρησιμοποιήσουμε την υπάρχουσα πληροφορία κοινωνικού περιεχομένου που αφήνουν οι χρήστες για να κατατάξουμε, να δημιουργήσουμε τους υπογράφους μας και να βασιστούμε σε αυτούς για να παράξουμε τις συστάσεις. Τώρα, ως προς την ουσιαστικά δηλαδή θέλουμε να περάσουμε σε κάποιες τέτοιες ομάδες πάνω στις οποίες θα δημιουργήσουμε τα recommendations μας. Ουσιαστικά, πώς λειτουργεί το μοντέλο μας? Βασιζόμαστε σε είδη γράφων. Το social γράφο, ο οποίος περιέχει τις ακμές φιλίας, εμπιστοσύνης ή οποιοδήποτε κοινωνικού περιεχομένου σχέσεις έχουν οι χρήστες. Και τον bivalent γράφο, ο οποίος περιέχει τις αξιολογήσεις που έχουν αφήσει για τα εκάστοτε αντικείμενα. Χρησιμοποιώντας αυτούς τους δύο γράφους, εφαρμόζουμε partitioning χρησιμοποιώντας το εργαλείο μέτρηση από το Caribbean Lab, φτάνουμε να παράξουμε τους υπογράφους μας και πάνω σε αυτούς εφαρμόζουμε αλγόριθμους collaborative filtering χρησιμοποιώντας τον Landscape Recommender από το Πανεπιστήμιο της Μινεσότα για να καταλήξουμε να πάρουμε τα recommendations μας. Πιο συγκεκριμένα, ξεκινάμε από το social γράφο, τον οποίο έπειτα από ένα pre-processing για να τον φέρουμε σε μορφή κατάλληλη να μπορέσουμε να κάνουμε partitioning, εφαρμόζουμε πάνω στο κοινωνικό γράφο την τμηματοποίηση, παίρνοντας μια κατάταξη για κάθε χρήστη σε ένα υπογράφο. Συνδυάζοντας αυτή την πληροφορία με τον γράφο των αξιολογήσεων των χρηστών, φτάνουμε να παράξουμε ένα σύνολο διαφόρων αρχείων, από τα οποία το πιο βασικό είναι τα ratings by partition. Στην ουσία έχουμε λοιπόν ομαδοποιήσει και τις αξιολογήσεις των χρηστών σε υπογράφους με βάση τους υπογράφους στους οποίους βρίσκονται οι χρήστες από την κατηγοριοποίηση που έχουμε κάνει. Αυτό το αρχείο δίνεται σαν είσοδο σε ένα recommendation evaluation task, όπου εφαρμόζουμε collaborative filtering πάνω στους υπογράφους μας και έπειτα ένα 5-fold cross evaluation για να αξιολογήσουμε τα αποτελέσματα, παίρνοντας το τελικό αρχείο αποτελεσμάτων από το evaluation. Για το evaluation των πειραμάτων μας χρησιμοποίησαμε 4 μετρικές, την mean absolute error και την root mean square error, οι οποίες ουσιαστικά υπολογίζουν την διαφορά σε αριθμητική τιμή της predicted τιμής που έχουμε προβλέψει εμείς από το actual rating του χρήστη, και 2 μετρικές, την normalized discount cumulative gain, το κέρδος δηλαδή στην ουσία, στο σύνολο των recommendations που έχουμε παράξει, αλλά και για τα top νη προϊόντα όπου το νη το θέτουμε εμείς. Η διαφορά τους με τις πάνω μετρικές είναι ότι στην ουσία κάνουν ένα ranking των recommendations και υπολογίζουν προσεγγιστικά πόσο κοντά έχουν καταλήξει σε σχέση με το αρχικό rating που προκύπτει από τις βαθμολογίες των χρηστών. Τώρα, για τα πειράματά μας χρησιμοποίησαμε δύο σύνολα δεδομένων, δύο γνωστά σύνολα του Opinions και του Flixster. Δύο σημαντικές διαφορές που αξίζει να παρατηρήσουμε είναι καταρχήν όσον αφορά τον κοινωνικό γράφο, η διαφορά στο πλήθος των χρηστών που περιείχε. Στο Flixster παρατηρούμε ότι είναι υπερπολαπλάσιος ο αριθμός των χρηστών, ωστόσο βλέπουμε ότι και στα δύο δίκτυα ο μέσος αριθμός σχέσεων φιλίας που είχε ο κάθε χρήστης φτάνει να είναι προσεγγιστικά όμοιος. Πιο σημαντική διαφορά είναι όσον αφορά τον bipartite γράφο, όπου ενώ ξεκινήσαμε από μεγάλη διαφορά χρηστών στο δίκτυό μας, τελικά παρατηρούμε στο Flixster υπάρχουν πολλοί ανενεργοί χρήστες οι οποίοι συμμετέχουν μεν στο δίκτυό μας, αλλά τελικά δεν φτάνουν να αξιολογήσουν προϊόντα. Ωστόσο, αν και ο αριθμός των χρηστών που τελικά κάνουν αξιολογήσεις στα δύο σύνολα ήταν προσεγγιστικά όμοιος, αυτό που παρατηρούμε είναι ότι στο σύνολο του Opinions ο αριθμός των items που καλούνται οι χρήστες να αξιολογήσουν είναι πολύ μεγαλύτερος. Αυτό, σαν άμεσο επακόλουθο, έχει τα items στο σύνολο του Opinions να παίρνουν πολύ λιγότερο αριθμό από ratings. Είναι λεπτομέρειες, αλλά θα δούμε παρακάτω και στα αποτελέσματα ότι ειδικά αυτή η διαφορά μπορεί να φτάσει ανάλογα με τον αλγόριθμο που θα χρησιμοποιήσουμε για τα recommendations να έχει ιδιαίτερη αισθητή χαμηλή απόδοση. Τώρα, για τα πειράματά μας, χρησιμοποιήσαμε την πλατφόρμα του ωκεανού από το GRNet, χρησιμοποιώντας δύο Linux συστήματα με 2 CPUs και 6 GB μνήμη το καθένα. Όλες οι υλοποιήσεις έγιναν σε Java, εκτός από το script που καλούσε το evaluation task, το οποίο ήταν σε Groovy. Συγκεκριμένα για τα πειράματά μας, χρησιμοποιήσαμε 3 αλγόριθμους collaborative filtering, τον user-user, τον item-item και τον SVD. Ο user-user από τη μία ψάχνει να βρει ομοιότητες μεταξύ των χρηστών με βάση τα ratings που έχουν κάνει στα εκάστοτε αντικείμενα, ενώ αντίθετα ο item-item προσπαθεί να βρει ομοιότητες μεταξύ των αντικειμένων με βάση τις αξιολογήσεις που έχουν λάβει από τους χρήστες. Ο SVD, απ' την άλλη, προσπαθεί να κάνει ένα mapping του item space σε ένα πιο dense χώρο, βασιζόμενος σε features που μπορεί να ξεχωρίσει από τα αντικείμενα και να καταλήξει να φτιάξει ένα πιο πυκνό και μικρό χώρο από αντικείμενα. Στα πειράματά μας εξετάσαμε έναν μεγάλο αριθμό υπογράφων, από 1 έως 1000, χρησιμοποιώντας για κάθε υπογράφο την πλήρη γειτονιά του κάθε κόμμου για να παράξουμε συστάσεις. Ωστόσο, για 3 τιμές υπογράφων επιλέξαμε να τρέξουμε ένα KNN με τιμές K nearest neighbors από 1 έως 1000. Το feature count για τον αλγόριθμο SVD ορίστηκε σε 100 features από τα items και για τη μετρική top NDCG επιλέξαμε τα top 5 recommendations. Περνώντας στα αποτελέσματα των πειραμάτων. Το πρώτο αποτέλεσμα έχει να κάνει συγκριτικά με τον αριθμό των υπογράφων τον οποίο χρησιμοποίησαμε και το evaluation time που χρειάστηκε για να εκτελεστεί. Όπως μπορούμε να παρατηρήσουμε εύκολα, ο χρόνος έχει αισθητή μείωση όσο ξεκινάμε και κάνουμε partitioning. Και το δεύτερο βασικό συμπέρασμα είναι ότι για κανέναν από τους 3 αλγόριθμους δεν ήταν δυνατή η εκτέλεσή του στον πλήρη γράφο. Άρα, εκ των πραγμάτων, το partitioning που κάναμε απέφερε αποτέλεσμα. Ειδικά για τον αλγόριθμο SVD, δεν ήταν δυνατός να τρέξει κάτω από 4 υπογράφους. Άρα, εκεί χρειάζεται ένα μέτρο να δούμε σε πόσους υπογράφους θα πρέπει να χωρίσουμε και μετά. Βεβαίως, θα μπορεί να παρατηρήσει κάποιος ότι από έναν αριθμό υπογράφων και πάνω δεν υπάρχει ιδιαίτερη διαφορά στον χρόνο εκτέλεσης. Ισχύει αυτό και μάλιστα για τον αλγόριθμο item-item μπορούμε να δούμε ότι αρχίζει και έχει και μία σταθερή πορεία. Άρα, εκεί τίθεται το ερώτημα του αν έχει νόημα να συνεχίσουμε από κάποιο σημείο και μετά να εφαρμόζουμε partitioning. Ως προς την απόδοση των αλγορίθμων μας κατά τη μετρική top NDCG, αρχικά για το σύνολο δεδομένων του Opinions, το πρώτο που παρατηρούμε είναι ότι ο αλγόριθμος user-user δεν πήγε καθόλου καλά. Αυτό βασίζεται στην παρατήρηση που κάναμε στη σύγκριση των δύο dataset, καθώς το Opinions έχει πολύ περισσότερα items, άρα σαν επακόλουθο οι χρήστες έχουν βαθμολογήσει πολύ sparse αντικείμενα, με αποτέλεσμα ο user-user να μην μπορεί να βρει χρήστες που έχουν αξιολογήσει τα ίδια αντικείμενα για να παράξει προτάσεις. Ωστόσο, οι αλγόριθμοι SVD και item-item παρατηρούμε ότι ακριβώς λόγω της απόδοσής τους έχουν αγγίξει πολύ ψηλά στάνταρ απόδοσης, προσεγγίζοντας το κέρδος σχεδόν ίσο με τη μονάδα. Μιλάμε δηλαδή για περίπου 96 και πάνω της 100 απόδοση προβλέψεων. Αντίστοιχα, συγκρίνοντας τα αποτελέσματα για το σύνολο του Flixster ως προς την ίδια μετρική, Αρχικά αυτό που παρατηρούμε είναι ότι ο user παραμένει σε χαμηλά επίπεδα απόδοσης, έχοντας απλά μια πιο σταθερή συμπεριφορά. Και πάλι οι αλγόριθμοι SVD και item έχουν πάει ιδιαίτερα ψηλά. Παρατηρούμε ωστόσο μια ελαφρά πτώση της απόδοσής τους σε σχέση με το Opinions, της τάξης του 92% prediction rating εδώ. Και αυτό έχει να κάνει με το sparsity του γράφου του σύνολου δεδομένου του Flickster. Το τελευταίο το οποίο παρατηρούμε σε αυτό το γράφημα είναι ότι από ένα σημείο ειδικά υπογράφων και μετά αρχίζουν οι υπογράφοι μας να παρουσιάζουν ένα υψηλό standard deviation στην απόδοση των αλγορίθμων. Τώρα, συνοψίζοντας τα παραπάνω αποτελέσματα, ξεκινήσαμε από την ερώτηση αν μπορούμε με κάποιο τρόπο να αξιοποιήσουμε την κοινωνική πληροφορία που αφήνουν οι χρήστες πίσω τους, έτσι ώστε να παράξουμε συστάσεις για μεγάλες κλίμακας δίκτυα κρατώντας υψηλά η απόδοση των αλγορίθμων μας